Okay, hereby call this open session to order. I'd like to ask everyone to please rise for a moment of silence. Thank you. Before we continue on the open session, I wanted to apologize to all those people that have been waiting. We're dealing with sensitive topics in the closed session, so apologize for being behind schedule. Matters from the closed session, we have moved by Councillor Somerville. I need a seconder for this, Councillor Watton, that the recommendations for the members be appointed. Daphne Mitchell be appointed to Waterfront Phase 2 Advisory Committee, Melanie Wright be appointed to Blackstock Recreation Advisory Committee, and that Marianne Matthews be appointed to School Age Friendly Advisory Committee. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next we have disclosure of pecuniary interest and nature thereof. Alright, I do have some pecuniary interests that were page 19, previously disclosed pecuniary interest on the April 9th GPNA minutes, as well as page 30, previously disclosed pecuniary interest in the April 23rd PCA meeting. So when we get to the minutes, we'll have to pull those on the those minutes. I won't be voting on them. Seeing no further pecuniary interest, announcements from council and staff. Starting off, Councillor Guido.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a reminder of two events occurring this week. On Wednesday is McHappy Day, and furthermore on Friday is our 14th annual Diva Night here downtown Port Perry. The festivities start at 6 p.m. We're going to pray for nice weather. There will be prizes, there will be karaoke, but most importantly, come out with your girlfriends, come out with your friends, shop and dine local, and have a great evening.
Other announcements from council? Councillor Kett and then Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. Similar to McHappy Day on last Friday, the island had a McGreat Day when they got $6.3 million for the natural gas line.
Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just an announcement to make sure that people remember that Sunday, May the 6th, is the walk for the hospice, and it begins at 9:30. You can do 1-2 kilometers or 5 kilometers, and it's from 9:30 until midday. So if you don't get up early, it's fine to come at 11 o'clock. So please come and support our hospice. Thank you.
And that's at the fairgrounds, the hike for hospice.
Yes, it's at the fairgrounds. Thank you.
Other announcements from council? Also, the Friday was the announcement of the extra additional long-term care beds, 53 beds that funding is going to be provided from the province, so that was great news on Friday. Next up, staff. Any announcements from staff? Seeing none, we'll move to presentation delegation. I'd like to call on Mr. Brett Puckrin, Chair of Economic Development Tourism Advisory Committee, to present or update us on the seasonal patio pilot project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, staff. A few weeks ago I was here before you and asked for direction to move forward with this project, the seasonal patio pilot project in downtown Port Perry. Received that support, and staff before you have presented a staff report by Kevin Arsenault, and I wanted to thank Kevin for his support and the way he's researched this staff report. It's actually quite detailed, and I think it's a great platform to move this project forward. However, I should also make a mention that I invited Joanne Callery from the BIA to come tonight, and unfortunately I got just at the last minute, she had to go to Whitby to pick up a paint order, and she communicated her regrets she couldn't make it tonight. But she has been her and the BIA have been a wonderful support, and provided comments to the staff report that the staff report addresses. It's going through this process has been to say the least, a learning experience. But I've also seen a sense of community and how people can work together to get something done. I think we found out a lot of other issues that are coming forward that we can address through this project, and I won't go into them here, but it's certainly come to the height of our committee that something that we can pay attention to as we move forward. Within the staff report, I'd like to ask for an amendment to the design criteria, and it's not really an omission of any sort, but when I was at Heritage, they had made some requirements that they'd like to see, but it wasn't in the conservation district design guidelines, so it really didn't get caught in the report. And what I'd like to, in the spirit of cooperation, and I'd like to reiterate this, that we've come this far because we've cooperated with one another. And in that spirit, I'd like to see their wishes embedded in this report. And the two areas is that only burgundy or green umbrellas are to be used for color, and that the patio furniture be approved by Heritage. Now, in working with Heritage and other matters, as well as this one, they have got a working group together to try to work things out very quickly. And the chair of the Heritage Committee, Marina Brock, has assured us that she will have that working group working immediately when requested. So again, cooperation here is imperative, and I think we're working our way through that. In looking at Heritage minutes, there's also the issue of whether in the design criteria with regards to railings or flower pots or benches. When I was at Heritage, it was mainly trying to give our committee a bit of a choice of, and I don't think it came through in their minutes, but if I can talk to that for a brief minute. Their first idea was to have nothing, because they wanted free will, come and go. But then looked at it as from a safety point of view, and they would have requested flower pots or a bullard, but then in working through the design, and then the third option would be a metal picket fence, really, what you'd see on the design criteria of your staff report. In working through this with Kevin and Carol Coleman and our committee, in the design criteria you need reflectors on the fencing in order for people to see it at night and so on and so forth. We believe that the fencing will look the best, or will operate the best from a safety point of view. We want to keep these patios as portable as possible, so anything drilled into a concrete or a pavement, we really didn't want to get there from basically cost. And the aluminum rail, the black aluminum rail, serves its purpose that it delineates the patio that you can see from a driver's vehicle. So I turn this back over to Mayor Rowett.
Thank you for the update. So I have Councillor Guido to start off, Councillor Drew, then Councillor Watton, and then any other, Councillor Kett, Councillor Back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Brett, for all your work that you've done on this. You've proven that with a solid plan and communication that we really can achieve something that at the onset may not have been palatable to everybody. So I truly appreciate that. I just have a couple of questions. On page 150 of our staff report, you don't need to reference it because I'll read it to you. It talks about the operation of the patio must cease between the hours of 11 p.m. and 8 a.m. In the initial presentation, I was under the impression that the pantry shelf was going to open early. Was that not the initial discussion, that she was going to be open around 6 a.m. for morning business?
Actually, I believe it's still going to stay at 8 a.m.
Oh, it's 8 a.m., okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure
8 a.m.
he
to...
appreciates that,
yes,
too.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then my next question, and this is not to be a spoke in the wheel, and I agree with you, I just would like to see this actually occur. Regarding the burgundy and green umbrellas, as well as the furniture being approved by our Heritage Committee, and this is probably a question for either our CAO or for our Director of Development Services, perhaps. Any existing restaurant in our BIA and Heritage Conservation District, have they had to go to the Heritage Committee to have their furniture approved?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. No, they have not. There are provisions in certain site plan agreements that restrict advertising on umbrellas. Advertising is not permitted.
Okay.
But not colors.
Not colors and not actual material of furniture?
That's correct.
Because I believe in our Heritage meeting minutes that we have to approve later on in the agenda today, it speaks to the fact that the Heritage Committee is recommending that there's no white plastic chairs on these patios. And I don't mean to call out any existing business here in town, but we currently do have one that has the white chairs, and they're in the BIA boundaries as well as HCD. So my only comment to this is, if we are going to expect certain businesses to comply, then we would either need to make this unilaterally fair so that all businesses comply, or we need to rely on the fact that our patio owners are going to respectfully and tastefully not decorate, but decorate their patios. I just think this whole term of council, we've been talking about fairness, and what one person has, the other person has to follow. So I just question why, and perhaps there's minutes from past Heritage Committee meetings that I haven't been able to find that indicate that this was a discussion point with the restaurant that currently operates a patio in both BIA and HCD. And if this has been brought to Heritage, I apologize in the past, but I'm not aware that this has ever been a discussion. I would just hate for the cost to increase for a pilot project. I totally respect Heritage. I live in a Heritage home, so it has nothing to do with that. But it's a pilot project, and if now the investors are going to have to incur further costs to get approved furniture, I just worry that, while yes, I know they meet at a very short notice, and I appreciate that, but I would just hate to incur more costs for a one-year term.
I don't know if, Brett, you've come across any...
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think Heritage, and I can't speak for Heritage, but as a building owner and as a business operator in downtown Port Perry, they really don't want white plastic chairs. That was their main point behind that. Now, I don't know if there's anything other than that they didn't like about the type of furniture, but it was white plastic chairs and tables that they didn't want. To say the least, what I don't want to happen tonight is we circumvent a committee's wishes. And right from the onset of embarking on this project, and it was my point of getting this to this far, was always asking the question, if there was an issue and it was going to be hard, what's the right thing to do? And I've always taken that road. And in my world, this is the right thing to do, because somebody's requested it. Maybe the white plastic chairs that are in another business, maybe it wasn't caught, or maybe it slipped through. But at the end of the day, these are going to... And as much as I look at costs, but maybe it's a black plastic, and that looks nice. That's my best answer.
Councillor Drew?
First of all, on that issue, I would suggest if you wanted that to go through as is suggested, that we not impose that on the other restaurant, but suggest or impose it when they want to replace them. So I think that would be the fair thing to do, is have them comply later. My question has to do with planters and baskets, and just a thought. I know that this was talked about, planters and baskets, when you first came to us, and I think that's great. They will look lovely. I would just ask that when they are chosen, that you work with the Parks Department so that they will blend in and enhance or whatever the hanging baskets that are going down Queen Street. So perhaps they could come from the same source, or at least our Parks Department will know the color scheme and the choices of flowers, etc., so that they could blend in and enhance the whole street.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Drew, I believe that's part of our logistics, is to liaise with the BIA as well as Parks and Rec to look at the flowers and colors and so on and so forth, to have a complementing type of streetscape. One thing I learned along this is that you can't have flowers drape over your railing on the roadside, because you can't impede on the public right of way. So again, you have to be, maybe you're into petunias versus trailing ivy. But again, this is a pilot, and we're going to work nothing's perfect. This report isn't perfect. But I tell you, it's got to be the best platform in Central Ontario to move this forward. So, yes, I'll take that back to our committee.
Thank you. Yes, and our Fred will be a big help to let you choose the flowers that would not go over the right away. Thank you very much for all of the work you've done. You know, I know this started a couple of years ago and didn't happen at that time, and thanks for taking it up again and working cooperatively with everybody. Thank you.
Councillor Watt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to add to the recommendations when the time is right for the Heritage.
I am going to pull it forward, and I've already written down. I'll just reread it so that if you're going to move it, then we'll look for a second at the time. Okay, so Councillor Kett?
Thank you, Mayor. I've heard this presentation a number of times, and if people are upset about the white chairs, some of us will collapse them, so. Anyways, Brett, thanks very much. There's two things I brought up the other day at the EDAC, and one is there any chance of council approving that for the first year we can use other colored umbrellas rather than the specified ones? I think they asked for Sierra, just to expedite things.
Sorry, the Sierra color was for the brown lumber.
Yeah, I thought it said that in the Heritage minutes. I thought it said for umbrellas too. But anyway, okay. Only got 700 pages to go through in a couple days. And the other thing is, and I mentioned it to our CAO, is that it really bothers me to know, or not to know, what the cost will be going forward, and if these people would know now what it would be. You know, so that's something that I just think should be out there, that if it's going to be $5,000 a year, that they know right now when they're trying a pilot project, or if it's $30,000 a year. I mean, we can always say that we're fair, but I mean, I just thought it might be something that we should put out there. And great work. I mean, I'll approve it, you know, but I'm just thinking could be food for thought.
I agree, and it may be a good idea to look at other communities that have had these projects and that are out there, and what other municipalities are charging. I don't think that'd be too hard to find out. But we certainly can, as a committee, we could actually maybe investigate that as well. Good idea.
Councillor Back?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and as somebody that witnessed Councillor Kett fall through a business's chair, I think you may want to not see the poor restaurant owner just opened, too. So, with regard to the furniture, I believe where there is white furniture currently, that probably was there, no doubt, prior to the existence of the Heritage Committee. So there's many signs in the downtown Heritage District as well that we sort of grin and bear because they're there and they haven't, until they want to replace them, they don't need to adhere to the strict signage requirements that the Heritage District has. But as I think everyone can appreciate, this downtown heritage core is slowly but surely getting its charm. And what it looks like today versus 10, 15 years ago, this is what's bringing people to downtown, is those strict rules and guidance. And I don't think you want to have a mismatch of colors and cheap furniture and whatnot. So it's to hold that strict adherence. And I think all of these owners that are going forth with this, I don't think they would put those tables to begin with. And I think the patio umbrellas, were they not, correct me if I'm wrong, Brett, the BIA also wanted those colors?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that it came through partly Heritage, partly by BIA. I have another idea. It just kind of came to me. I get these ideas sometimes, but in the Heritage, when you go for a Heritage permit, you're restricted to Heritage colors. So if you don't like burgundy, you don't like green, it has to be a Heritage color. So it's maybe not purple, or it's pink, or whatever Heritage color is. But if, in the spirit of cooperation and compromise, choose Heritage colors.
Are you asking that they could be multiple colors, be it that they're Heritage, or that each and every patio has the same agreed upon Heritage color?
No, they can pick their own Heritage color, but it would be a Heritage, your whole entire patio would be the one color of umbrella, but it's a Heritage color. If you don't like burgundy, you don't like green.
I have more. I have a question because Kevin's not here, so I guess I will give this to the other Kevin, Mr. Heritage. Oh, I'm sorry. How come I thought you were involved in this? Oh, you got to pass. Darn. Okay, so Ms. Coleman, and I know that we are waiving the fees, but is there a building permit that's required for each of these structures, or typically? See, I think I know what I'm talking about.
I'll get the Mr. CAO to answer that.
Yes, thank you. That question did come up in the course of developing the design criteria and the application, and a building permit is not required unless it's attached to a structure. So it's sitting by itself, and it's less than 2 feet off the ground, and it's not attached to a structure. Now, if there is one case, one of the potential patios could be adjacent to the structure, and that'll be a question of not attaching it. So could be in that case, but the ones that we're talking about on Queen Street that take a parking spot, no.
So then there would be no inspection by the building inspector as to adherences to codes or safety?
Well, the patios that are being proposed are just 6 inches off the ground. The slats that in the structure would be resting on the ground. There's really, I don't think, in the design criteria, concern about structural sufficiency. And then the railings, guards would be attached as railings and guards would be in a normal case. So there'll be, I guess, a review by the town to make sure the design criteria is followed for the road occupancy. So, but there won't be a need for a building permit unless you attach it to the building, you make it more than 2 feet off the ground.
Okay, and further to that, and I just want to get my head wrapped around this because I've had people ask me this, with regards to safety of either if patrons will be sitting on what is now a parking spot, or if pedestrians are walking in that spot close to live traffic. Is this fence enough with regards to safety regulations as well as the township's insurance, that they're satisfied? And do you think $5 million is enough insurance for the owners of the patios if something, God forbid, were to happen?
Yeah, thank you. Another great question was discussed, again, when the guidelines were prepared. So $5 million was the number that was researched 2 years ago when the patio project came forward. Wasn't part of that, but I understand from speaking with Kevin Arsenal that there was consultation with our insurer, and that was found to be the amount that the municipality could reasonably ask for. And I mean, the number, I mean, it's hard to say whether that number should be more, but $5 million was found to be a number that was acceptable. And then in terms of liability, the way that staff have looked at this is it's about the same liability as walking along the sidewalk, which is unprotected, or sitting in this parking space. And our current manager of Works, Parks, and Rec is just from the town of Whitby, and town of Whitby piloted this last year, as you know. So we kind of used his experiences also to gauge what was done in terms of, you know, protecting the people that were sitting on the patio. And in that case, it was really a wood baluster, not that much different from what we're proposing. And to put something of any more substance in that would really increase the cost and I think take away from the architectural feature of the patio.
And I think we can all agree, if anybody's been at the Four Corners of Whitby, that's a much busier traffic than it is downtown, although we have more shoppers, but anyhow. Remember, living in Whitby, they complained about Port Perry, and they wanted to know how to get that part like us, so they're envious. Now, for Mr. Puckrin, with regards to number 5 of the recommendations that the seasonal patio project be approved subject to endorsement of the BIA Board of Directors. There's a BIA meeting tomorrow, so how do we do chicken before egg?
This was mainly to try to get this completed for the 2018 season. I've had extensive conversation with Julie Brock and Julian Cowlery, but I've also came to council looking for a blessing, but I didn't want the blessing without the BIA's endorsement. So this now gets thrown back to them for tomorrow night. They called a special May 1st meeting. They didn't really meet until May 8th, and they're trying to work with us to meet our timeline, and they thankfully have supposed to have quorum for tomorrow, and tomorrow night we should have either a yes or no. But it's their jurisdiction, it's their territory, it's their area, and I really don't want to move forward unless we have a blessing of that association.
So does that mean that the answers to these questions are provided, or you'll be there tomorrow? I
asked if they wanted me in attendance. They said at this point in time, no. I told them I was making an amendment on the floor, and I will communicate the result of that amendment tonight, and so that they have all the information going forward for tomorrow. But I'm perfectly able to meet with the BIA tomorrow, if asked.
And I just have one more, and it's just sort of a general, it's not to Mr. Puckrin, but I guess we've got it anyhow. On page 155, with regards to the parking, I just have a couple of questions to staff with regards to, they have the township parking lot, including where the staff parks, and it's zoned green as public parking, but Monday to Friday, that is not allowed for the public to park. So, is that considered part of this count? And it's not gonna change anything one way or another. And then I'm just wondering why the marina parking lot is considered private when it's township parking, or township property.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. With respect to the staff parking lot, it is for staff only until 5 p.m. each day. So when the busier times in the evenings and weekends, it's available for the public to use.
All due respect, the majority of Monday to Friday, this town rolls up at 5 o'clock. The majority of the stores are closed. I know that this may, like it or not, that is the reality. I know that some of these patios and the restaurants will be open, but I hope going forward, when we're looking at parking, that we really get a true snapshot here, because I'm a resident that got a ticket in that parking lot years ago, and I was shopping.
Councillor Somerville is the only one who hasn't spoken, then I'll go around to second time. Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Brett. You've done a lot of work here. Good work. You spent a lot of hours, I can tell you that. Just a couple of things, and I'm nothing against anything. I'm just curious. You're not blocking off the sidewalks at all, are you? It's going to be out in, like I just noticed on page, whatever this page is. I hate these ones, they don't have numbers on them. 151, where it's on the sidewalk, and then you have to walk around the patio, and then on the next page, it's out in the parking space. You're doing the out in the parking space, aren't you?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Somerville, we've left it open for two type of designs because of the alcohol and gaming commission. Because if you're serving alcohol, we believe, or you're serving with a waiter and waitress, you don't want to walk across foot traffic in order to serve somebody, and that's why so somebody like Queen Bean and Nutty Chocolatier, they would rest upon the boardwalk, with the parking space. That's where they would be, or if you're at Marwan's, you would have tables up against your building. So we've left it open in order to meet that criteria.
So two different designs.
Correct.
Just a note, and I'll talk to you about this later, but I was just in Montreal, and they have really great ideas for street patios, and it's right on the street, and they don't block any parking off, but I'll talk to you about that at another time, because I thought I should have taken a picture of it and brought it back with me, but it's a great idea, and it'll be serviceable, and it's for sidewalks, and it's the kind I think we could probably do with on here for a lot of our establishments. So I'll talk to you about that later, Brett, but thank you. That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Councillor Somerville, are you suggesting a road trip?
Yeah.
I want to go on her road trip. Yeah. Councillor Kett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick one. I think it's the point that Councillor Back brought up is a very valid point, that if we should have one of our building inspectors just inspect it before it's used, just to be safe.
The town staff, bylaw staff will have a look at it. We just have to be careful that where there's no permit issued, a building inspector looking at it takes on a certain amount of liability in absence of a permit. Wouldn't normally have a building inspector look at it, but town staff will definitely be looking at it from bylaw and a municipal perspective to make sure it fulfills the design guidelines that accompany the application. If it requires a building permit, like it may in the one case, for sure.
My point being that if the spans are too far apart, then it's not to code, then maybe we should just be there just in case, just to be safe. I understand if you don't want to issue a permit, but still.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Everything's been asked. I do want to thank you, Brett, for, you know, trying to make everybody happy, and we know how hard that is to do. Yeah. But, good job, excellent, and I hope this receives support from the endorsement from the BIA, and that we see this coming out there, because I think, you know, this council supported the concept before when it came back. It was just making sure we had exactly what you have been able to achieve, and that is getting everybody on side with it, and addressing the concerns that all the different stakeholders had. So, kudos to you. You're probably exhausted from this, and but you'll be able to look back and see how much you championed the cause with this one. So, great job. So, if we're going to bring the report right after this, but moved by Councillor Back, seconded by Councillor Guido, that the delegation, the Chair of Economic Development Tourism Advisory Committee Seasonal Patio Pilot Project be received. Any questions on that? All those in favor? Carried. And then now bringing forward the report 9.2.1. Now, Councillor Watton had said to move it forward with those amendments, that only burgundy and green umbrellas be permitted, and that the Heritage and Museum Advisory Committee approve the furniture to be used on the patio. Now, I know it was brought up with the heritage colors, so I may suggest we don't want to derail this with maybe something that we could also put where it says the color of the umbrellas to, or other heritage color if approved by the Heritage Museum Advisory Committee, because they are approving the patio furniture. If there's something that's going to deviate from the burgundy and green, well, they could deal with that then. So I don't know, Councillor Watton, what you would...
All I was going to suggest was that subject to the guidelines as offered from the Heritage Committee.
Okay, so...
That'd be approved subject to that as well, so it kind of encompasses exactly what you said.
Okay, so the Heritage Committee approved the... Well, you're moving the motion, so I don't want to put words in your mouth. So how did you want to move it?
I just wanted to add that it be approved subject to the guidelines of the Heritage Committee's recommendations as well. So then it can, something, you know, perhaps the clerk can wordsmith it better than me.
I'm just looking at Brett, because you're the one that's going to be, you know, what if that's capturing it, or if you feel more comfortable because there were certain requests for this amendment.
I'm just thinking, I was the one at committee for Heritage. They said burgundy and green, but it's...
I'm fine with that too.
Burgundy and green?
It's burgundy and green.
Okay. So, Councillor Watton, then as originally? Okay. Councillor Back, are you seconding the motion?
Yes, I can second it, but I have a question.
Okay, shoot.
As I'm just sitting here, some things randomly pop in my head too. I have to ask Councillor Guido. Was the BIA not blue and green? Or you weren't at that one?
I wasn't present at that meeting, and if I was, I would never suggest burgundy.
I'm thinking it's, I'm sitting here too, and I'm thinking it was blue and green, and I hate that burgundy color as well. So, blue and green are the township's colors, and we can certainly get blue and green in Heritage.
So these are both colors of the umbrella and the patio furniture from the Heritage Committee, right? So Mr. CAO, just like what Councillor Watton was saying, is that the umbrella colors and patio furniture be approved by the Heritage Committee. And then it just goes back to them, and we're not...
But Mr. Mayor, it was the BIA that had more of an issue with the colors of the patio umbrellas, and that they sort of be consistent. And I think it's, you want the BIA's approval, and otherwise it doesn't go forward, so...
I see it in the minutes. It was in the minutes of the Heritage that talked about those colors and the umbrellas, so...
I believe, if I may speak, I believe if you give the option to the Heritage Committee, that should be enough. They've chosen burgundy and green, but at least they may give them another option. I would say, let them decide.
Yeah, and if the BIA makes a a comment tomorrow night, so that can be referred to the Heritage, and the Heritage can incorporate to theirs.
There's some cross-pollination in that association and Heritage, so hopefully we can work again together.
So, Councillor Watton, that the umbrella colors and patio furniture be approved by the Heritage Committee?
Thank you for going back to my original.
Councillor Back?
words for you, that's what you meant.
Councillor Back, that the umbrella colors and patio furniture be approved by the Heritage Committee. That's the only thing we're adding on to the recommended motion.
Number 6.
Okay. All right, any questions on that? The motion's on the floor. Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Brett, and good luck tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Okay. I need a mover and a second for the consent agenda. Councillor Guido, seconded by Councillor Watton. Now I need polls, and I will tell you which polls I have first. So first, 9.1.3, 9.1.4 are my polls because I have pecuniary interest. 9.1.7 is pulled by Councillor Somerville. 9.1.9, do you need me to tell you the title too? Yeah, 9.1.9, Economic Development Tourism Advisory, pulled by Councillor Guido. 9.1.10, Waterfront Phase 2 Advisory Committee, March 27th, pulled by Councillor Somerville. 9.1.14, Squamish Heritage and Museum Advisory, April 18th, Councillor Guido pulled. Councillor Back, 9.2.1, Seasonal Patio Project we dealt with, never mind. 9.2.5 is the geotechnical, Lake Squamish enhancement, Councillor Back. 9.2.7, municipal office renovations, Councillor Back. 9.2.9, administration of Naloxone by Fire Services. I don't know how you say that. Councillor Back. Naloxone. And 9.2.10, open air burning bylaw, Councillor Guido. And then 9.2.11, regional report, Councillor Guido. And that's it. Any other? Councillor Somerville?
Yeah, I don't want 9.1.7.
Okay. Does anybody else need 9.1.7?
Yeah. Okay, I didn't want.
No, you didn't pull it. Do you want it pulled?
I want 10 and...
10 is already pulled, yep.
Yeah, that's fine. And I want, I'll give it to the 99.
Healthy Lake Squamish,
9.1.3, page 9.
13, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
9.1.3.
Okay. And that's the Healthy Lake Squamish Advisory Committee.
You know what, I gotta check this.
Councillor Guido?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I no longer need 9.1.7 because we discussed the patio furniture in that item.
Okay, top. Any other polls? Well, Councillor Somerville double checks that. May I suggest the bylaw needs to be pulled on any of these that were being pulled? Is that, should be pulled? So the relating bylaws, open air bylaw.
Not 13, 14.
14.
Take 13 out, do 14.
So does anybody else need Healthy Lake Squamish Advisory Committee pulled? Okay. All right, and then 9.4, the bylaw 3218, open air burning, because we can't pass a bylaw if we're going to be talking about the report. Anything else? Okay. Seeing none, consent agenda is already moved. Save and accept the items being pulled. All those in favor? Carried. So first item, I have to leave the chair for the 9.1.3 and 9.1.4 of the minute.
Are there any questions on, actually, let's see if we have a mover. Moved by Counselor Back, seconded by Counselor Watton. Are there any questions on 9.1.3, the GP&A minutes from April 9th? No questions? All those in favor? Carried. 9.1.4 is Planning and Community Affairs minutes, moved by Counselor Back, seconded by Counselor Kett. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried.
Nine 9.1.9, pulled by Counselor Guido. Counselor Guido, are you moving the recommended that the endorsement of the minutes?
Is this 9.1.9? Sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
9.
Yes, I will move
Moving
them.
it,
Yes.
second by Counselor Kett. Okay. Go ahead.
So I just have a question on the minutes, and perhaps this is to our clerk. As we're all aware, thanks to the newspaper articles on our toilet discussions, we've already decided that we're going to remove the word toilet from the signs, and the committee recommendations indicate that they support using the word toilet. Do we need to remove these from the minutes, as we've already dealt with it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to Council. Not particularly. We'll note that, and we'll notify the committee coordinator of that committee just to say that Council's already made a decision on that, but we'll just note that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, it's been noted. Any questions on that? Councilor Kett?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Reported an $18,000 loss in 2017. I'm just wondering why that would be in there.
What page are you looking at?
Page 69, yeah. Second bullet.
Why they're in the minutes, you're saying?
Yeah, why?
What relevance, you're saying?
Sorry, Mayor. I'm just wondering why we're mentioning anything about, like, financially about the chamber. Is that not a private issue?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to Council. I would suggest it was mentioned at the committee, so the committee coordinator recorded it in the minutes.
Oh.
Councilor Watton? Yeah. So, all right. Any other questions? I will just, since we pulled it, I wasn't going to pull it for this, but the only comment I was going to say is on page 68, there is a reference about holding the council business tour in September, so the theme being food and beverage businesses. I just merely suggested that since it's in September, the council tours that we normally do, maybe one of the stops could be include the seasonal patio, since they should still be up, assuming it's approved. So that was all. We could experience it firsthand as a collective group. Yeah. Any other questions? None. All those in favor? Carried. Next is the 9.1.10, Councillor Somerville, which is the waterfront Phase 2. Moved by Councillor Back. Councillor Somerville, are you seconding that as the puller? Okay, Councillor Somerville.
I'm just going to mention it on page 75. Ian McDougall moved a committee recommendation that if the Latcham Centre space is to be relocated, that in addition to the Scugog Memorial Library be considered as community space consisting of a lower floor for a marina facility, public washrooms, and if possible, a pump house and a sub-basement, and it goes on to talk about it. Then, on page 112, so I'm doing two at a time here. So on page 112, which would be the Heritage and Museum Advisory Committee, update on there says, Phase 2 Waterfront Advisory Committee. The last meeting of the Waterfront Committee, a motion was recommended to note if the Latcham Center was to be removed, that the marina be expanded and a rec center be built over top of the marina. This also to include a public washroom. They're not coinciding. I don't know whether that's... Huh? No, it's not, because no, he's not. He's saying that in addition to the Scugog Memorial Library, be considered as community space. I'm not getting it. And then he says, consisting of a lower floor for marina facilities, and then he's got over here, it's together, it's not the same. That the Latcham Center was to be removed and that the marina be expanded.
So, Councillor Somerville, is your point just that it doesn't appear to be the same?
No, it doesn't
Okay.
appear to me to be the same.
All right.
It's probably not an important deal, but I saw that.
Okay. I'm just because we're on the topic here, a question I had is the endorsement of this recommendation from an advisory committee. I would be hoping that we would be investigating that much further, just because it's suggested to look into it. So I don't know if this is the proper thing to be endorsing this or to be referring this to staff to take into consideration or to report back on with the rest of it, or I'm just looking at staff's comments. Mr. CEO, if you wanted to just comment on that. Councillor Drew?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I had the same thought, and I was going to pull this report, but it was already pulled. But on page 77 is the committee recommendations, and I was going to suggest that the first recommendation and second, but it's actually the third recommendation here about the Latcham Center. And I was going to suggest that the Waterfront Advisory Committee recommended the next steps of Latcham, the mill, and the marina be received and referred to staff for consideration in the design of the overall waterfront. Because it's far from a complete project, and I think it needs to happen as a complete project and see how it all fits in.
Mr. CEO, did you just, I just know that I brought the same question up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation, yes, from the Waterfront Committee deals with this particular matter, and there is some concern of council approving this in absence of knowing the overall design.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I would agree with Councillor Drew that if this was just received to be dealt with with respect to the overall design, I mean, this has merit, we're not saying it doesn't, but what's the rest of the waterfront look like? And shouldn't be approved in isolation.
Mm-mm.
And further, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Somerville, it is basically the same thing, different wording. The suggestion was that the marina come down to an expanded marina on the base floor, and then the second floor, which would actually be at street level, would be the recreation center, primarily for the seniors, but it is a recreation center for public, just like the Latcham Center is now. So it is basically the same thing, they've just chosen different wording.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Councillor Drew, did you say that you were wanting to amend this to be, which one was it? Which one?
It was the third item on page 77, the third and. It says replanning session, next steps, Latcham Center, Old Mill and Marina. Goes into 78.
Also a recommendation on page 75.
These are the summary of them, right? The 77, so.
And I did have a further,
okay. So we'll deal with this one at a time. So, I looked at Councillor Back, Councillor Somerville, if it's accepted as a friendly amendment for it to be received and referred to staff as opposed to endorsed in as written.
And then through the mayor, does this come back to that committee? Because the committee's sort of trying to do a matrix and get on with things. Councillor Guido and Councillor Drew and myself are on the Waterfront Committee and were present when this recommendation was brought to the table then. So I don't know, can you tell me how staff would like this worded?
Through Mr. Mayor, I would be glad to do that. I think in this case, as mentioned, this recommendation should be received and referred to staff to be considered in conjunction with the overall waterfront plan. So this is one piece of the puzzle that needs the other pieces together to come back to council for approval.
Okay, so through the mayor, how will this be reworded then? Because it does sort of state here, it's sort of an if or then. If Latcham Center space is to be relocated, this is what this particular committee would recommend. It's not that council's endorsing it and rubber stamping it and that's how it will be. It's just acknowledging that this committee in charge of sort of the puzzle, if Latcham Center goes, this is what they would bring forth to council, and we're not approving it today. It's just this is what they would have as their preferred. So I don't know how we reword that, because this is just saying this is their preferred. If, then, this is what we want.
And I just, the way I read it, it was more of a directional motion that if this was relocated, then that. I think that's the exact purpose of the Waterfront Phase 2 Advisory Committee, of doing that holistic approach with the matrix, et cetera, that this is a recommendation, and then, like I said, I think it's a great idea, but it's really got to see what else is going to happen there, because it may be that something else is a better idea, so we wouldn't want to be hung up with next term's council with an endorsed set of minutes here, and somebody pulls it out and says, yeah, but council's already endorsed this, this is what is going to happen if Latcham Center moves. So I would just be saying that it's not that we're disagreeing it, we're not also stamping this and saying this is going to be a piecemeal approval. That's what we got into before, and I think that that's what we're going back, is that holistic approach. So that was just my same concern. Not that it's a bad idea. I think that the committee would just keep moving on, saying, yep, that would be there as a holistic recommendation. Councillor, yeah, so I'm still dealing with this amendment to there, so Councillor Back, the amendment was to receive and to refer to staff for the eventual holistic plan. Okay, Councillor Somerville?
I don't know. I don't like the way it's read. I don't like the committee recommendations on 77. I think if it's going to say one thing, it needs to say the same thing all the way through.
Okay, but if we're receiving it and referring it to staff, it's less important about the exact wording, it's more the concept of it. That's what I wouldn't get hung up with the
and you're right, it's only a recommendation,
yeah.
So then I can go along with the
Okay.
recommendation on
All right,
that
so then we don't have to do an official amendment in there. So now, back to where I was with this, Councillor Drew, were you, finished with your...
Yes, what are we going to do with the other recommendations?
Okay. We can come back to them. So it's amended to be received and referred for that one we've dealt with. So Councillor Watton was next up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I was just going to query the recommendations as to what the mandate is of the waterfront. I think the fact that they're doing a matrix is great, and I think they should be encouraged to put together several ideas, and this would just be one of them. So, but I'm not certain of what is that the mandate. I just would like clarification on that.
You already asked that. In terms of reference, a mandate on that. So Councillor Watton, were you looking for terms of reference, or, because...
I'm sure that one of the members of the committee can just tell me what they see their role as. I would be happy to hear that.
One of the committee, Councillor Back, Councillor Drew, and who else, Councillor Guido, are on the... So, just talking about the general...
Yeah,
the general purpose of the waterfront as, Councillor Back?
Thank you, through the Mayor. The mandate is the land and uses of where the old mill sits, where Latcham sits, where Marina sits, and including the parking lot behind the CIBC, the municipal lot. That is the mandate of this particular committee.
All right, next I have Councillor Kett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just looking at this and it sounds perfect to me, just as if.
Okay.
Wait, I don't think it has to be referred. We've got better use for our staff than to be worrying about ifs.
No, but the comments, I believe, were about the Latcham Centre was moved, now it's set up that that's what would happen, and I think that what if there was a different plan that the users or stakeholders of Latcham Centre don't even want that? I mean, there's a whole big process around this. That's why I'm saying the holistic approach of not committing ourselves to something without seeing the big picture, the big vision. Councillor Guido, did you have your hand up? No? Any other, the next question, Councillor Drew, was the other recommendation you were saying?
There was some additional information that came through today about the mill, and Director Heritage may want to comment on that. And there's these letters from the Smiths, and I'm just wondering, would you recommend that we approve this recommendation, this advice from the committee, or because of the new information that came forward?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, are we speaking with respect to the next steps for the Latcham Centre Old Mill and Marina?
The National Historic Site request.
But that's not part of this resolution.
Page 77, the first recommendation from the committee.
Oh, it's a different one. Yes, as outlined in my email that I circulated to Mayor and Council and Senior Management staff, staff is not recommending at this time to pursue a National Historic designation for the Old Mill site.
Could you explain further why, for the benefit of everyone that's here?
We're not recommending it at this point in time because the township is still examining what uses would be appropriate at the old mill and what modifications or interventions would be required to introduce those uses into the building. There may be substantial modifications we don't know at this point in time, and what impacts that would have on such a designation.
Further, if I might, it was said at this particular meeting that any renovations inside the mill would not affect the National Historic Site. Have you come up with further information that may in fact not be the case as it stands now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, that's not my understanding. That could affect, the inner workings of the mill could affect the designation as well.
Councillor Back?
Thank you, through the Mayor, and this is again a chicken and the egg situation because next week I have a notice of motion to actually reconsider these letters, and I don't know, did you want me to say anything about it today or wait till next week, just the rationale and behind that?
You've already given notice that you're going to be giving notice of motion, which will come through the proper channels for the next meeting, but dealing with this particular recommendation, say anything that's related to it.
So you want me to, my rationale? Okay, so I have a few points. Process for the National Heritage status will take time. It's thought through the Waterfront Committee that their process of when they're going to actually have the holistic design or strategy to recommend to council, and staff have everything in a line, and council approves the strategy for the future of the old mills and the land that I had mentioned just a few minutes ago that in itself is going to take time, and that the process for the National Heritage status work in tandem so that the feasibility of when the Waterfront Steering Committee has their proposed recommendations to council, and council of the day as well as staff endorse said plan, that then that's the time when the township will be looking for funding and for grant opportunities. So if we waited until we had every I dotted and T crossed, and then looked to have a process of designating National Heritage status, which will indeed not only open more doors for grants, it will bring more public interest and more tourism to the area because it will be promoted as a national site. That once we have our plan, it's there. Then we can, as we always hear, shovel ready for grants. These two things should be in tandem. From what I've looked at, the national or curtail repurposing of the building. The historical elements of the building should be documented, which has been done thoroughly with staff with regards to the provincial Part 4 designation that's already in place. There has been an inventory of the internal as well as outside heritage structural qualities of the building, and as well as any structural changes or modifications should be documented. And there's many examples of National Heritage status buildings being extensively modified for present-day use without jeopardizing their historical value. We have another one in town, which is Town Hall 1873. So, you know, I'd hate to have that and I know that the National Heritage status, if we wanted to do something that was significant structurally, we always have that opt-out. But to me, my rationale is, apply now. It may take 6 months, it may take a year or 2 years to even grant National Heritage status. It's not as inhibited as Part 4, which we already have designation on the building. And then when we're all ready to go, we're green light, and we have more possibilities, and we don't have to wait another year or two to say, hey, why don't we do this? No harm, no foul as far as I'm concerned.
So you're coming forward with a notice of motion, you're going through that process already. I would suggest that, you know, that's when we act on whatever your notice of motion is going to be, and I'm just uncomfortable with the way that this is recommended because I'm signing a letter on behalf of the township that is written by Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who have articulated very well, but I'm still not understanding fully what you're saying, and I'm not saying I don't believe all the stuff, but it really has, you got to take what staff have looked into and maybe we can look into it further and find out, answer these questions, what if this, what if we want to do that, and get a response back in writing maybe from the process, because I wouldn't want to endorse something and go through a process here and then later find out that it's handcuffed to us. So that's the concern. Not saying it's yeah, we want access to money for sure, and I remember skimming over some of the stuff, but if I recall, it's a lot of information that you have to fill out for these applications. So I would just prefer that we don't rush into it, but we also get the ball rolling if that's where we want to go. So I'm looking to see if the same thing, you're already going to be addressing it at the next meeting, that we change this recommendation to receive and refer to staff. So, Councillor Back, you're okay with that, Councillor Somerville? Okay. All right. Then we had one more there. I don't know if there are any other questions on this. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Kett.
Yeah, on the letter that Director of Heritage sent out, I have a couple of problems. One is I believe the National Trust for Canada, and it's they're just there to raise money, but I believe probably, I mean, the danger of demolition, is that in their mandate? Is that what they said, or is that just wording from the letter that you wrote?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the councillor, that's what they indicated to me on the phone, that they, on their website, they have top 10 endangered sites in Canada. And they had the impression that the old mill should be included on that list.
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with that. And if you probably look forward, or look back, I guess, to the fact that there was recommendations done by a lawyer or an engineer that said there had to be repairs made, and a year later they weren't made. So maybe it is endangered.
If I could, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to be clear on that. The mill is not in danger of demolition. It's owned by the municipality and has in a heritage district conservation area, which has, as you know, a designation, and it has its own individual heritage designation. The risk of demolition of the mill is in the hands of this council and no one else. And from what I've heard from council, I don't think there is a risk of that at this point.
No, and the other thing is when we're going out as a heritage committee and we're trying to convince people to keep their buildings heritage, we don't want it to look like do as we say, not as we do. So.
No, and I would argue that it is designated on Part 4 of the heritage, so I don't think that there's any question that we're preserving municipal assets as much as we are expecting the residents to preserve theirs. So any other questions on this before I ask Mr. Heritage one last question? I think it'd go to Mr. Heritage, maybe it goes to somebody else, maybe it's to Ms. Coleman. The other motion regarding the epicenter for the trails, I don't know if that was discussed with staff members at all or anything, or what repercussions it has. Is it just a sign, or is it that is the last recommendation, that the recognition in the form of signage of the epicenter of the Port Perry Trail be located at the municipal pier? I don't know if staff were consulted or had any feedback. Any members of the committee recall that the Ian McDougall's motion, the recognition in form of signage of the epicenter of the Port Perry Trail be located municipal pier, page
78. It's on page 78.
Again, it comes back to
Through the mayor, what is your question?
My question is what was the discussion around this, because it doesn't really go into a lot of detail except for that requiring signage and recognition of form of signage in the municipal pier. I don't know.
I think it's with regards to the waterfront trail, and then we're also going to be expanding or enhancing that trail up Old Trail Lane. See, I say things backwards all the time. Yes,
trail, yeah.
Thank you. That this just be a sign that, because we've been added again, thankfully, put back on a cycling trail, and this is just, in a sense, again, to promote some economic development in the terms of cyclists, which, remember, deputation a few months back. Very well paid people tend to cycle and tend to spend their money on lattes and beer. So if we could have a signage at the at that municipal pier, just to designate that is the epicenter of the Port Perry Trail. It's part of, we're supposed to be enhancing and enlarging it.
I don't disagree with there's not enough details there, and I just wasn't sure if staff was consulted on it to see what size, where's the money coming from, have they budgeted for it, what's the expectation, that's all I was asking about it, so I wasn't sure if that was discussed at the committee.
I think Mr. McDougall's also on the Durham Trail, so he may just be joining some of his information from a few committees.
And I was going to just request that it maybe this gets referred to staff to have further conversations with Ian to find out, what he's looking for, and then if it's a significant item that needs to come back, comes back. If not, and staff can do something with it, then if it's within their budget or it's immaterial, then that's fine too. So that's all I was looking at. Any other questions on that then? Mover and seconder, refer to staff? Mover and seconder, I'm just looking, I'm looking at the Councillor Back and Councillor Sommer. Are you okay without having to do an amendment to it? Because we still have this motion. All right. Okay, so we've got receive and refer to staff for the recommendations. Any other items? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. That was longer than it should have been. Next item was 9.1.13 was not pulled anymore. Councilor Somerville needed. It was 9.1.114. Muskego Heritage Museum Advisory Committee minutes. Councilor Guido.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to refer to page 114 on our agenda, and it's more for an update regarding the trailer with a sign with White Feather Farms. I'm sure every single member of council and member of staff have received an inquiry as to the status of this. Can I please ask for a formal update now that we do have bylaw officers as to the status of the sign?
Mr. Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through the mayor to the councillor. A sign bylaw violation has been issued by law enforcement, and the applicant is required to remove the trailer no later than May 14th. That's to give them some time for the ground to dry out before the trailer can be moved.
Thank you for that update. It was frozen a few days ago. That would have been a good opportunity, but nonetheless, I appreciate that there is some movement on this because it has been asked at many social events and through emails, I'm sure, to all of us, and it would be really nice to see that removed. So thank you.
Okay, that was moved by Councillor Guido, secondly Councillor Kett. Questions, Councillor Kett, then Councillor Somerville.
Yes, I think that should be moved fairly quickly now that we've approved the soil site plan, because that was his complaint, that he wasn't going to move it until the soil that was supposed to be moved 10 years was moved. So.
Councillor Somerville? Okay. Any other questions on this? All right. Seeing none, minutes be endorsed. All those in favor? Carried. Next item pulled was 9.2.5 by Councillor Back, the geotechnical and Lake Skilling enhancement.
Yes, through the mayor, this is for Director Coleman. So, what happens if the borehole testing confirms much more peat than what was thought to be? Will all of the money for the increased cost be coming from fundraising? And also, can the dredging continue without having this pedestrian design on this area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. So we're hopeful that this is an isolated area that has this much peat and that the bulk of the design can continue with the berm. But to know that for sure, we need to do the additional testing. It's possible that this is reflective of the whole area, that the berm design won't go ahead. If we want to do a pedestrian area, we could still look at other designs, like possibly a boardwalk through there or something. So there may be a way to do it without a berm and still have a pedestrian area, or we could find another way to contain the soil and create the wetland area and still do the dredging in the wetland area. But the possibility, if it's too cost prohibitive, not to have a walking area. Right now it's a lot of questions, and we're hoping that this additional testing will give us those answers.
So Councillor Back, you moving the recommendation, and seconded by Councillor Watton. Any other questions on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next is 9.2.7 Municipal Office. Councillor Back, are you moving the recommendation? You pulled it. And then I need a seconder for Councillor Kett. Councillor Back.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so this will be for Director Heritage. First off, in recommendation number 5, that additional funding not to exceed an amount of $24,987.30. So what are we spending here? Are we spending $37,798, or are we spending up to and over $50,000? Because recommendation number 2 talks about 37,000 and change, and then an additional 24,000.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll answer that, sorry. Under the financial implications section on page 192, so that, all of the renovations on all 3 floors account for about $53,000. We have about $28,000 left in a capital account that was opened in 2016, I believe. So we're looking for the additional 24, so it's $53,000.
Okay. And then on page 2, the alterations in basement storage area with regards to communicate freely, I thought we did this like a year or so ago, or 2 years ago, with regards to shoring up the area and entrance to where communicate freely was and completely separating it from the township's archives. Why are we revisiting this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to council, that has not been completed yet, so that's why it's here as a part of this project.
So for all that time, Communicate Freely had access to that area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the council, that's correct.
Okay, so in addition to that, going further, and I recall in the budget at the time, we had budgeted an amount for this already. Where is that?
I just before anybody else says, recalling from there, it was, Communicate Freely was to pay for it, the wall partition, but they were to come back with drawings and design and work with staff for the partition.
I guess I have a question. When will this be completed, this particular spot? Because we have an election coming up, and I would think that this area here is an area where ballot boxes and such are kept, are they not?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to council. No, that is not correct. Ballot boxes will not be in an area where Communicate Freely can get to them or have access to them.
So in the basement, there's a separated area from where the archives are and where the ballots are, and where Communicate Freely can go right now? I haven't walked it, I don't know, I can't visualize it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, nobody will have access to any ballots except myself and the election coordinator. That's it. There'll be no access to any outside party for that purpose.
And I recall, if what you're referring to is, there's a locked room that's where the ballots were stored before, but it was still a locked, separate room.
I know this is not part of the report, but are those ballots then put into a vault?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, that's correct.
Okay. Is that vault in the sort of same vicinity, though?
Yeah.
No, I would like to know, because I thought that this already was done. It was said it was going to be done at the time, where we didn't want anybody just from outside of the township staff being able to be amongst papers and whatnot that are sensitive. And the fact that this is year 1 or 2 going on, I have a problem with that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor and the Council, I share this problem. Immediately upon being aware of this, I started action to put this in place to have this change. However, it's been a long process in trying to we were working on it with the manager of IT, organizing a meeting with Communicate Freely and organizing to get to a point where we can present them with something. And then this project came up, so we included it a part of this project. So that sort of delayed it to be included within this project. But I can guarantee you that no one will have access to ballots except myself. I don't disclose the location of ballots. I mean, it's just not a part of my process to tell everyone where the ballots are going to be held. But I can guarantee you that nobody, including in Communicate Freely or anybody in this room except myself, will have access to those ballots.
And I just want to also say there were other things such as fire code and a wall partition and airflow. There's all these things that go into it. Wasn't just build a wall partition as easy as that when when it was first ball kicked back to Communicate Freely provide a partition, it became more complicated than just a partition wall because you had to have a dual access, and then we also had security come in and then add another door access, which also need. So there's been activity happening with it, because I've been asking as we've been going through, and I'm just happy to see that I think we're coming to
Getting there.
finalization of this.
And I think that is it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kett?
Thank you, Mayor. Just on that same issue, I'm looking in there and you're saying that there has to be 2 entrances to Communicate Freely's.
No, a fire, like a alarm unlocked door. I'll look to the chief to add the proper lingo, or the Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to council. We did have the fire department review putting up a wall, and the recommendation from both the fire department and the building department is when we put up a wall, they have to have 2 exits. In case there is a fire, you can't have only 1 exit in case that exit is the one that is blocked. So that has been my instruction from the fire services for Scugog through the fire prevention officer.
So my question is, there's a door at the top with the stairway it comes down into a hallway, and then they need another door out of there as well?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to council. Yes. So when they get into their area, yes. The answer is yes.
But just to be clear, because I asked a further question on that, it'd be locked, only unlocked based on an alarm, or unlocked, it would activate an alarm if it was unlocked, so it's not like...
I'm not worried about security, I'm just wondering why it's gonna be a hallway about 10 feet long, and they've gotta have 2 like an entrance and...
Through you, your worship, yes, it does.
Okay. Councillor Drew?
No.
No?
I was trying to tell you that Councillor Kett...
Oh, okay. Any other questions on that? I have recommendations moved by Councillor Back and second by Councillor Kett. Did I get that correct? The recommendations for renovations? Okay. Any questions on that? Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next item was the 9.2.9, pulled by Councillor Back, moved by Councillor Back, second by Councillor Somerville. Councillor Back.
Thank you. Through the mayor to the chief. So, there's been a history of, with regards to police and SIU investigations when naloxone is administered by police. What is the implications with regards to our fire service employees if they administer this? Is there any, do they have the negative blowback, so to speak, as the police officers are that are doing the same thing, trying to save a life?
Short answer is no. Through you, your worship, I'm sorry. I am familiar with the one case that you're talking about within policing, and I believe the death was not related to the application of naloxone or the administration of naloxone. It was of other matters. It's just unfortunate that it was a death in police custody, and hence the SIUs involved. Fire service doesn't have that type of watchdog, if I may. The administration is through health services, Durham Health Services, and we've vetted the agreement through the Durham's legal team, so yeah, I'm quite comfortable with it.
All right, any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next item pulled was 9.2.10, moved by Councillor Back, seconded by Councillor Somerville, pulled by Councillor Guido first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the fire chief. Just a couple of questions. Open air burning, does that include those popular chimeneas?
Through you, your worship, yes.
It does? Okay.
Yes.
And was there any thought when you put this together to, within Port Perry, to allow recreational burns for people that have larger lots?
Through you, your worship, this process has been ongoing as I've been researching a number of communities that I felt had similar circumstances as we do here, i.e. the lake and close proximity to a recreational type community, and I couldn't find a community that allowed that type of burning in the urban areas. And frankly, it's not my decision, it's yours. I would strongly recommend that you don't allow it. There's a number of factors to consider, and that is the community, the urbanized community itself. We have retirement homes, windows open. You know, if there's a lot of burning within the community, then potentially you're creating a hazard for those types of occupants. Not to mention the fuel loads that are in an urbanized community, a built-up community. If a small fire gets out of control in the rural area, you know, it's going to burn off some grass and what have you. Here in the urbanized area, you could be talking about it getting into people's sheds, homes, garages, vehicles. I would strongly recommend not allowing it in the urban areas.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Drew?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the chimeneas, or whatever you call them, are not allowed in the urban area. Is that correct?
Through your worship, that's correct.
Okay. I read it, and it's a question I've had in my mind all along, and I didn't feel that it was captured, at least to my understanding. So what about the propane fire pits that are, you know, people have on their patios? Are they disallowed as well?
Through your worship, yes, they are allowed, actually.
They are allowed.
They are a clean burning device that is regulated for clean burning, and by virtue of their construction, right through from the tank hose into the burning assembly, it's very well regulated and permitted. Yes.
Thank you.
Next, Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I just found my answer, but I will ask you for everyone else. If you have a burn permit, and in April, and we have a devastating ice storm, and we have tons and tons of broken branches and trees and twigs, can we, and you have a permit, can we burn them in April?
Through your worship, may I ask a question? Where?
In the rural
areas. In the rural areas. Ideally, I would suggest that, as is written in the bylaw, that if you can compost or use your composting opportunities throughout the region, do so. Don't burn. There's risks to burning. That being said, you know, if there was an event that caused a number of tree fallings and what have you, I would totally expect people to rid them properly, legally, and exercising a burning permit. And
it's damp out there. It's wet, so it's not going to run away. The fire's not going to run away. As long as you have a burn permit. And it's April, and...
Through your worship, let's hope not. But the base of the ground is wet. The dry foliage from last year is still brown and dry, and that's what causes us more grief than anything.
Well, I think we have a lot of people that have been burning in April because of the amount of ice, of trees and branches that fell during that ice storm. So I think there's a little bit we can probably just shut our eyes to. Thank you.
Councillor Watton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Chief, for your report and update on the bylaw. I just have a couple of comments, and you're aware of them. On page 245, it says, "No person shall burn any materials normally collected under the municipality's garbage, blue box, or yard waste collection programs." So, based on that, that would mean we're not allowed to burn those branches that Councillor Somerville's talking about, because they take, as long as they're up to 3 feet, they can be bundled and they can be collected by the Regent's program. So, which is it?
Through your worship, I would prefer exercising the compost program. However, within the bylaw, you'll see there is the discretion. I do have the discretion to offer permits in exceptional circumstances, and I would suggest that if you came to me arguing that you have an exceptional circumstance, I would gladly sell you a permit.
Okay, well, I already have mine, thank you. The other comment is that in your in your description of the wood byproducts, it speaks to tree trunks, tree branches, and brush that do not contain all these various chemicals and so on. And I'm wondering if it should not read that do contain, because we're not allowed to burn any wood byproducts, but are those wood byproducts, do they contain these copper arsenate and pesticides and paints, etc., or do not contain them? Which should the description be?
Through you, Your Worship, do contain.
Do contain, so we need a correction on that, and that would be just on the, both, I guess, in the bylaw and in the report under the wood byproducts.
What page was that,
Thank
just
you.
for easy reference? Do you have it?
244.
244? That's the bylaw, 244?
No.
That's just under the, I don't know, maybe it is, but that's just the wood byproducts. It means wood or wood product, tree trunks, etc. And you notice that it says that do not contain.
Yeah, I see it. Okay,
Thank you.
Councillor Back.
Thank you. To the chief, so, no open fires, no chimeneas, no, bonfires, campfires within the urban area. So, does that mean if somebody within the urban area comes into the fire station and wants to buy a burn permit, they're gonna be sent on their way?
Through Your Worship, that's correct. But I will give you an example where perhaps I will use my discretion. There is an event, and I apologize, don't recall the event, at the fairgrounds annually, that they come and they ask for a permit. And there's very stringent restrictions put on it. It's a community event, and I do allow the permit for that occasion, that one-off occasion.
What about the scouts? Because as a beaver leader, we had, and the scouts and cubs and whatnot, just over here, they have, regularly, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, I'm getting them in trouble, but they have, campfires out on that lot.
Through you, Your Worship, I actually learned about that today, and I'll be having a little discussion with them.
Okay.
To make sure that they do it by the rules.
Well, they do it by the rules, but what kind of exemption is that then, because that's urban area?
Well, we would go and investigate where they're burning, how they're burning, what they're burning, and hopefully come to an agreement that's workable for both.
Okay, so how will it be communicated, because it's foreign to me because I'm not from this area, but seems to be a bit of culture with regards to campfires in the backyard and bonfires and whatnot. How is this going to be communicated to the public that that's not allowed? Because I'm sure some of those happened without burn permits to begin with, and how are we going to communicate the urban area? Because the urban area goes right up to Whitfield, and a lot of people in that area may think that they're rural, and they're not rural.
Through you, Your Worship, thank you. First of all, for the urban area, we attached the urban area to the official plan. And as the urban area expands, so shall the permit, or lack of ability to get a permit. And we have a great communications person, and I will exercise her abilities along with my own to ensure that this bylaw is published out to the community. And I'll be honest, this bylaw isn't a whole lot different than the past one. It's just, in my books, a little bit neater. There's a couple small changes, but for all intent purposes, it's just a neater bylaw, easier to review and grab perhaps where you're applicable as an oversized burn or a recreational burn.
Now, with regards to page 227 of the actual Fire and Emergency Services Schedule C Guidelines for Open Air Fires, I don't see on here anything that states no fires within urban area. Is that there because if somebody had an urban address, they'd be sent on their way, and that's why there's no guidelines to that? Or is there a way that perhaps that message could be put on there?
Through you, Your Worship, we could look at putting that on there, but again, we'll make make sure we get this out to the community, using the social medias, newspaper, et cetera.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the open air burning bylaw update? Councillor Cat?
No, sorry.
Okay. All right. Already moved. All those in favor? Carried. We'll get to the bylaw after the next one here. Regional report, which was moved by Councillor Drew, pulled by Councillor Guido, seconded by Councillor Guido. Okay, Councillor Guido.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for your report, Councillor Drew. Just a few questions for you. The first item is in regards to the speed limit changes approved by Regional Council. Which roads are those?
Reach Street is one, and, Reach Street is one, and, the, Durham 21, and, Simcoe Street.
Okay, and will they be lowered or
Basically, I think they're all lowered.
Okay.
There might be one little section that's increased, but, I think basically they're all lowered.
Okay,
There's one, the one on Durham 23, is lowered, to just past, Willow Tree because of the tremendous amount of traffic that goes in and out of there, so I know that one for sure is lowered. Simcoe Street is lowered, further north than it is now, I can't recall just the boundaries for Reach Street.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Drew. And the next one, I couldn't champion anymore. I appreciate that you've expressed your frustration at the region regarding the traffic backlog on 7A. As a resident of 7A, I appreciate that the region is doing some intersection monitoring. However, I can attest they don't really need to do any monitoring. It's a ridiculous backlog that is increasing at actually an alarming rate. When we first moved there, 15 years ago, they had just installed traffic lights at Old Simcoe and 7A, so that gives everyone a sense of how slow the traffic was 15 years ago. And then it increased to long weekends on Friday, and now it's Wednesday at 4 o'clock. The traffic is backed up. What is the region's plan to do with the statistics that they are going to receive from this monitoring?
Well, first of all, I've been working on it for 6 or 7 years, and they also have to abide by what the MTO, so that's part of the delay. They are monitoring, first of all, they're not supposed to have an advanced green going west to go south. I mean, like the traffic going west but wants to go south. They're not supposed to have an advanced green if there's if there's less than 2 cars. I've seen that happen, and I told them that. I've seen the advanced green when there's no cars in that left-hand lane. So they're looking at that. Because to me, that is one of the main problems, is the advanced green at peak times, like after 3 o'clock any day, and certainly Friday nights, not so much Sunday because people are coming back. But that's what causes a lot of the backlog, to my thinking, that goes out almost to Manchester on a Friday night. So they're going to relook at that. They are going to, there's some mechanism that they've got to see how far the backlog is on the west side, and they will adjust accordingly, so they say. And also there will be different timing for those, through those holiday months from May to September, October.
Okay, thank you. And is there anything that Scugog as a municipality can do to strengthen your fight at Region to get something done, or eyes looking at this stretch of road, or is this monitoring pretty much, we're lucky to be having that right now?
I think, to your point, I think if the council sent a letter endorsing the recommendations that they have given me, that I think that would add some weight to it.
Thank you.
But it is in the plan, so.
I appreciate that, and thank you for fighting on this for 6 years. I would appreciate if we could, as a municipality, and I'm not sure, Mr. Clerk, how you would prefer we go about doing this, but I really would like to send a letter of endorsement, because the traffic is only going to increase, not decrease.
I can give you the correspondence for that, and you can, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Back?
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Drew. So do you have a drill down date on when the sign that's going to go to 60 from 80 within the urban boundaries on Simcoe is going to occur? I know that they were waiting for better weather, and we've had a few hiccups in our weather, but this week seems like a nice week to get a sign. I have people that are offering to spray paint.
Well, I hate to make a promise, because every time I don't make a promise, but, you know, the weather has gotten in the way so many times, but my information is it should be this week or next week.
Okay, I hope they do, because all of a sudden, and I didn't even see them put it up, they were able to string a light across Simcoe, and I don't know how they managed to do that, and so I'm hoping they can do a sign, because people are anxious about that. And secondly, I just have a question with regards to the 5th paragraph, with Durham Region receiving AAA credit rating, which is great, but how is it that there will be a connection to the province's downgrade? How would that affect Durham Region's credit rating? I can't see how those are two different bank accounts.
I'm not entirely sure myself. I just know that we've been told that time and again that with the threat, and now it's happened, the province of Ontario has received a lower credit rating, and we've been told a number of times that if and when that happens, it is puts ours in jeopardy, our AAA credit rating on jeopardy. Maybe Director Valentin can. It would just, through you, Mr. Mayor, it'd be pure speculation on my part.
Okay. All right. Any further questions on the regional report? Seeing none, regional report, move the regional report be received. All those in favor? Carried. Next item is the bylaw that was pulled. We have 9.4 because there were the typo error in there, so we're just going to move this by Councillor Watton with that correction from do not to does, or was it do not to do? Do contain, yep, and I have a reference here, and the clerk has a reference to. Moved by Councillor Watton, second by Councillor Kett, for that particular bylaw, 3218 be passed with page 244, change definition of wood byproducts from do not to contain, do contain, and an update and reprint. That's for me. Don't read that part. So any questions on that for the bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. And that is the end of the consent agenda items, and we don't have any notice of motions. Next is new business general information. Seeing none, and we completed our closed session confirming bylaw. Confirming bylaw 13. We need a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Kett, Councillor Watton, second by Councillor Watton. All those in favor? Carried. And then motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Guido, seconded by Councillor Drew. All those in favor? Carried unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, I have a regional report here from December 18th that has the speeds and where they are. So if you want to have a look at it.
Sure.